You are exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix. The kind that lives in your chest, in the tension between your shoulders, in the endless mental loop of what you still need to do. You push harder. You create systems. You optimize. You set bigger goals. And somehow, the finish line keeps moving further away. This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is the trap of force. What if I told you that the ancient masters discovered something radical? That the secret to progress is not more effort, but less resistance. Not trying harder, but flowing smarter. The Taoists called this Wu Wei, and it contradicts everything modern culture taught you about achievement. This is not permission to quit. This is an invitation to stop fighting the current. Wu Wei translates directly as action without action. Not inaction, not passivity, but action without struggle, without the mental grinding that exhausts you before you even begin. It is the difference between swimming with the current and thrashing against it. Modern ambition operates on a simple formula. More input equals more output. More hours, more hustle, more sacrifice. The harder you try, the faster you succeed. This belief is so deeply embedded that questioning it feels almost dangerous, like betraying some unspoken contract with productivity itself. But here is what no one tells you. Effort has a threshold. Beyond that threshold, trying harder does not increase results. It increases resistance. This is the backwards law. The principle that the more you pursue something with desperation, the more it slips through your fingers. Alan Watts described this perfectly when he said that the desire for security is itself the source of insecurity. Think about the last time you could not fall asleep. The harder you tried to force sleep, the more awake you became. Your effort created the very obstacle you were trying to overcome. Or consider public speaking. The moment you fixate on not being nervous, your heart races faster. Your hands shake more. Your mind blanks completely. This is not coincidence. This is psychology. When you approach any action with desperation, with attachment to a specific outcome, you introduce tension into the system. That tension becomes friction. That friction becomes failure. Not because you lack skill, but because you are working against your own nature. The Taoist sages observed this pattern everywhere, in nature, in human behavior, in the invisible laws that govern success and failure. They noticed that water does not try to flow downhill. It simply flows. Trees do not strain to grow toward sunlight. They grow. Birds do not practice flying with grim determination. They fly. Somewhere along the way, humans convince themselves that achievement requires suffering, that if something comes easily, it must not be valuable. This belief is poison. It turns every action into a battle, every goal into a burden, every moment into a test you might fail. Wu Wei offers a different path. It says that true mastery looks effortless, not because it is easy, but because it has aligned with the natural intelligence of the moment. The skilled musician does not think about each note. The experienced driver does not consciously calculate every turn. They have dissolved the gap between intention and action. This is not about lowering standards. This is about removing the invisible interference pattern that sabotages your own effectiveness. Zhuangzi tells the story of the drunken man who falls from a moving cart. He tumbles to the ground, rolls through the dirt, and stands up completely unharmed. Meanwhile, a sober man taking the same fall might break bones or suffer serious injury. What protects the drunk? His unconsciousness, his complete lack of resistance. When the drunk falls, his body does not tense. His mind does not panic. He does not brace for impact or fight the momentum. He simply falls. His muscles stay loose. His movements stay fluid. The impact distributes naturally across his body, instead of concentrating at rigid points of resistance. The sober man sees the fall coming. His mind screams danger. His muscles contract. His body becomes a rigid structure fighting against the momentum of the fall. That rigidity, that resistance, that desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable creates the injury. The trying is the problem. This is not a recommendation to live unconsciously. This is a teaching about the power of non-resistance. The drunk man's wholeness is preserved not by effort, but by the absence of interfering mental patterns. His body knows how to fall. When his mind steps aside, that natural intelligence can operate. Look at nature for confirmation. Does grass try to grow? Does it set goals, create spreadsheets, visualize its ideal height? No, it grows. Not because it forces growth, but because growth is its nature when conditions allow. The grass does not fight the soil. It does not resist the rain. It receives what comes and expresses what it is. A river does not try to reach the ocean. It flows downhill because that is the path of least resistance. When it encounters a boulder, it does not attack the stone. It flows around it. When the path narrows, it speeds up. When the valley widens, it spreads out. The river is always moving toward its destination, but never forcing, never fighting, never exhausting itself with effort. This is the intelligence of Ziran, self-soness, spontaneous nature. The universe has its own momentum, its own patterns, its own intelligence. Wu Wei means aligning with that intelligence instead of constantly battling against it. You have experienced this. Remember the last time you were in flow, working on something and time disappeared. Your hands moved without thinking. Solutions appeared without forcing. You felt energized instead of drained. That was not magic. That was you, briefly, stepping out of your own way. The paradox is clear now. The drunken man survives because he stops trying to survive. The grass grows because it stops trying to grow. The river reaches the ocean because it stops trying to reach the ocean. And you will achieve more when you stop trying so hard to achieve. This creates an uncomfortable question. If trying hard is the problem, what does effective action look like? How do you accomplish anything without effort? Start by recognizing mental friction. This is the invisible tax you pay every time you approach a task with resistance. Mental friction sounds like this: I do not want to do this. This is going to be hard. What if I fail? I need this to work perfectly. Why is this taking so long? Every one of these thoughts adds weight to the action. The task itself might require 10 units of energy, but your mental friction adds 20 more. You are not just doing the work. You are fighting yourself while doing the work. You are carrying the task plus the story about the task, plus your anxiety about the outcome. This is exhausting. Not because the work is hard, but because you have made it harder than it needs to be. Wu Wei removes that extra layer. It approaches the task with simple presence, not excitement, not dread, just presence. What needs to be done? Do that. What comes next? Do that. No story, no drama, no desperate attachment to how it should feel or what it should produce. This connects directly to Ziran, the concept of self-soness. Ziran describes the natural, unforced expression of what something truly is. A pine tree does not try to become an oak. Water does not try to flow uphill. Each thing expresses its fundamental nature when it stops fighting what it is not. You have a fundamental nature too. Certain actions energize you. Certain environments bring out your clarity. Certain rhythms match your natural pace. When you force yourself into patterns that violate your nature, You create constant friction. You can sustain it temporarily through willpower, but eventually you burn out. Modern culture worships rigid goals. Set a target. Break it into milestones. Track your progress. Measure everything. Optimize constantly. This works until it does not. Until the goal becomes a prison. Until every deviation feels like failure. Until you achieve the goal and feel nothing because you were so focused on the destination that you missed the entire journey. The trap is not having goals. The trap is treating goals as fixed destinations instead of directional guides. A goal should orient you, not obsess you. It should provide direction without demanding a specific outcome. When you become attached to exactly how and when something must happen, you create the conditions for suffering. Think of it this way. You want to travel east. That is your direction. But you do not control the weather, the road conditions, the detours you will encounter. If you grip the steering wheel with white knuckles, demanding that the journey match your mental picture perfectly, you will arrive exhausted and resentful. If you stay oriented east while remaining flexible about the path, you will arrive refreshed and enriched by what you discovered along the way. This is not lowering your standards. This is raising your effectiveness by removing the interference pattern of desperate attachment. So how do you act without attachment to results? You focus on what the Taoists call Ti, inner virtue or inner power. Ti is not something you acquire. It is something you reveal by removing what obscures it. Think of Ti as your natural magnetism. When you are aligned with your nature, when you act from presence instead of desperation, you become attractive without trying. Opportunities appear. People respond differently. Doors open. Not because you forced them, but because you stopped blocking the natural flow. Attachment creates energetic desperation. People sense it. Opportunities avoid it. When you need something too badly, you repel the very thing you are chasing. When you want something without needing it, when you can engage fully while remaining unattached to the outcome, you create space for it to arrive naturally. This is not detachment in the sense of not caring. This is detachment in the sense of not strangling. You care deeply about the work. You give it your full presence, but you release your stranglehold on how and when it must pay off. Here is a practical exercise. The 5-minute non-doing pause. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Sit comfortably. Do absolutely nothing. Not meditation. Not visualization. Not planning. Nothing. Just exist. Breathe. Notice what arises without engaging with it. Your mind will rebel immediately. It will generate urgent tasks. It will create anxiety about wasting time. It will produce compelling reasons why you should stop. This rebellion is the sound of your habitual forcing pattern, that constant mental grinding that you have mistaken for productivity. Stay with the nothing. Let the rebellion happen without obeying it. What you are practicing is the space between stimulus and response, the gap where Wu Wei lives. Most people have no gap. Something happens. They react. A thought appears. They chase it. An emotion arises. They become it. The 5-minute pause trains you to notice that gap, to recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness watching the thoughts. And from that awareness, you can choose action that is responsive instead of reactive, aligned instead of forced. Alan Watts called this the law of reversed effort, the principle that certain things can only be achieved by not trying to achieve them. You cannot force yourself to be spontaneous. You cannot try to be relaxed. You cannot pursue happiness directly. These states emerge naturally when you stop interfering with them. This is the great turning. The moment you realize that your primary obstacle is not external, it is the pattern of desperate forcing that you have been taught to call ambition. When you dissolve that pattern, when you learn to act from presence instead of panic, everything shifts. Not because the world changed, because you stopped fighting it. We began with exhaustion, the bone-deep tired that comes from constantly pushing against life. You now understand why. Every time you approach an action with desperation, with rigid attachment to specific outcomes, with the belief that trying harder is always the answer, you create resistance. That resistance is what drains you. Wu Wei offers liberation, not from effort, but from unnecessary suffering. You still act, you still create, you still pursue meaningful goals, but you do it from a place of alignment instead of force, from presence instead of panic, from trust instead of control. The drunken man survives the fall because he stops fighting. The grass grows because it expresses its nature. The river reaches the ocean because it follows the path of least resistance. These are not metaphors. These are instructions. This is how reality works when you stop interfering with it. Mental friction is expensive. Every moment you spend fighting what is, resisting your circumstances, demanding that life match your rigid expectations, you waste energy that could be used for actual creation. The practice is simple. Notice the friction. Notice when you are adding unnecessary weight to simple actions. Notice when you are strangling outcomes instead of allowing them. Ziran reminds you that you have a nature. When you align with it, action becomes effortless. Not because the work disappears, but because you stop working against yourself. Your inner power, emerges naturally when you stop obscuring it with desperate forcing. The rigid goal becomes a flexible direction. The outcome you demanded becomes a possibility you allow. The future you tried to control becomes a present moment you can fully inhabit. This is not surrender. This is strategy. The most effective strategy available. Alan Watts understood this deeply. He spent decades translating Eastern wisdom for Western minds trapped in the gospel of harder. His core message never changed. You are not broken. You do not need fixing. You need to stop interfering with your own natural intelligence. Try the 5-minute pause today. Sit with nothing. Let your mind revolt. Watch the rebellion without obeying it. Feel the space between stimulus and response. That space is your power. That space is where Wu Wei lives. If this resonates, if you feel the truth of it in your body, subscribe to Taoist Diary. This is not entertainment. This is a path, a way of moving through the world that honors your nature instead of violating it. A practice of presence that dissolves unnecessary suffering. The Masters left us these teachings because they work. Not because they are beautiful philosophy. Not because they sound profound. Because they describe the actual mechanics of effective action. When you align with the current, you travel faster with less effort. When you fight the current, you exhaust yourself and arrive nowhere. You have been taught that achievement requires suffering, that if something comes easily, it must not be valuable. This belief has cost you more than you know. It has turned every action into a battle, every moment into a test, every breath into a measurement of whether you are enough. You are enough, right now, without achieving one more thing. The work continues, but the desperate quality dissolves. The striving softens into flowing. The forcing transforms into allowing. This is not passivity. This is power. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that accomplishes without exhausting. The kind that attracts instead of chasing.